Hey Ottawa, this is your Monday market snapshot for the Ottawa real estate market for Monday, November 4th, 2024. My name is Annalie Rice. I'm a realtor here in Ottawa, Ontario, and every week I bring you the details of what's going on in the Ottawa real estate market. This week I'll have all of the month-end data and charts that I've gathered. I don't yet have the Ottawa real estate board updates. That'll come sometime later this week. But I do have lots of info. There's some pretty surprising things on a couple of the charts, and I hope we can go through what's happened this last week. Looking at the citywide data, we see that the active inventory dropped by 134 this past week. Now that can be explained by partially by the fact that it's a new month, so there's lots of properties that expire or get canceled at the end of the month. But we've also, that end of the month happened basically on the weekend. So a lot of properties, if they're going to get relisted, will get relisted this coming week. So we'll probably see a bump in relists next week, or in next week's update. Sales this past week were actually up from last week, which wasn't fully unexpected. We saw how many conditionally sold properties there were last week, and it was looking pretty good. So up by 19 this past week. For the active listings, it's across property types, and all property types are fairly evenly done. For the sales, the condos were the strongest bump in sales. This is the visual for the inventory breakdown in sales. You can see that the active inventory definitely dropped off this week. I do expect it to jump up a little bit, potentially bump up a little bit next week, or at least slow down. It's not going to keep crashing off. There will be a bunch of relists this week. Now, you can see those little dash lines. You can see how close our inventory level is this week. It's just slightly above where we were last year at this time. You can see that last year's peak was kind of like it climbed to that point, it peaked, and then we were into the October, November kind of time frame, and it just dropped off. I do expect it will drop off again like this this year, but it has been elevated throughout the whole summer from late spring. Looking down at the bottom there, you can see the conditional sales remain above our firm sales. So again, we should have a fairly strong number of sales next week, but you can see that those lines are much, much higher than what we were at last week. And that will come up in a couple slides there when I show you the number of sales and how it compares to last year. This chart gives us a longer term look at the inventory levels at the end of each month. So you can see our detached inventory. You can see that it's been quite high throughout most of this year. So for the majority of 2024, it's been very high, and it's just slightly higher than we were last year. Although you do have to go back to 2018 to a time that we had more inventory on at the end of October. This is the same chart for the townhome inventory, and you can see that we are slightly lower inventory this year at the end of October than we were last year at October. The last 3 years have had fairly high elevation of inventory, but prior to that, you had to go all the way back to 2015 to have the same inventory levels that we had these past few years. It's been quite low inventory. Townhomes are a great starter property for people, and so that's why they've been so in demand, because they're a bit more economical. And finally, we have the condo inventory. You can see that it's quite a significantly higher level of inventory than we had the last couple of years and throughout the pandemic years. You have to go back to 2018 or 2017 for the levels higher than what we're seeing these days. But again, very elevated throughout the last 6 months or so. Okay, so the new listing breakdowns. We had 392 properties that were listed this past week. 157 of those were relisted properties, and 235 were new to the market properties. That's the exact same number we had last week, which is surprising. The higher number of relists, it represented 40% of the properties that were listed this week, and that's partially to do with the new month, us being in November. It's also notable that this week of reports this year, we are in November, but the same week last year was still October. So there's a little bit of differences there because their cancellations at the end of the month and relists and such hadn't yet happened. So the spikes on the diagrams are a little different. We had 233 sales this past week, and we had 12% of those were with no conditions. That was a drop of 4%, so it's definitely on a downtrend there. We had 21% of the properties that sold this past week were at or above asking price. Again, that's lower than what it was throughout the spring time. For sales within the first 7 days, it was 9% of the sales, 20 properties, and 45% of those sold with no conditions, 80% at or above asking. So that remains still quite competitive. People move quickly when properties are listed either low or really fairly, and it's a good property. Sales within the first 30 days, there was 101 properties that sold, and that was 43% of the sales. 13% of those sold with no conditions, and 38% at or above asking price. A total of 48 homes sold for at or above their asking price. 28 of those sold at asking or up to 1% over asking. That was 58% of those sales. 14 homes sold between 1 and 5% over asking. That was 29% of the sales. And 6 homes, or 13%, sold for more than 5% of the asking price. The highest percent was the same property for the highest dollar value over. It was 26% over asking and $131,600 over asking. So that was a detached century home. It was 2-bed, 1-bath in Hintonburg. It was listed for $499 and sold for $631,500 with an offer date and time set up. Note that this home had actually sold early in 2024 as a total rundown as is fixer-upper, and so this was actually a flip. Someone went in, did the work to fix it up, staged it up nicely, and got a pretty good price, in my opinion, for a 2-bed, 1-bath home. Next, we'll look at what happened in the different areas of the city. Okay, first in the central urban region inside the Greenbelt, we had a drop in the active inventory across property types, but most notably in the detached and condo market. The sales were actually slower this week than last for detached in towns, but the condos did see a rise by 9 of sales this past week. In Canada and Stittsville, we have a drop in active inventory across property types. Fairly large jump or drop for condos, actually down below 40 again. For the sales this last week, they were up across property types, most notably in the townhome market. In Barrhaven and Riverside South, we have a drop in the active inventory for detached in towns, but we saw a jump in the number of condos on the market for this last week. Sales were a little bit of a mixed bag. Pretty slow for detached in towns actually this week, although it was a climb for detached, a drop slightly for towns, and 7 condos selling in Barrhaven Riverside South this last week, so a rise of 3. And finally, in Orleans, we have a drop in the number of detached homes, quite a drop, 15 fewer homes on the market. Towns and condos were actually up this week for active inventory. Sales were a little bit of a mixed bag again. We had 20 sales, so +4 for detached, slight drop for towns, and 10 condos selling in Orleans this past week, which is fairly high for this time of year. This is the full data for the residential detached market. You can see that we remain above 100 days average days on market for the central urban region for detached homes. The other ones, for the most part, are starting to creep up. Citywide, it's getting close to that 100. This is the full data for the townhomes. And finally, for the condo market. Next, we'll get into the data for the end of the month, and I do have all the charts updated and the full updates for my data. I don't have the Ottawa Real Estate Board data quite yet. Okay, so this table shares the average sale prices for the different property types from September 2024 compared to October 2024. You can see that in all cases, it's down slightly from what we had last month. I would say that this is largely due to the fact that we've had elevated inventory throughout the late spring through the summer into the fall market. It's just high levels of inventory have given those buyers the ability to, for the most part, make more informed choices, take their time. In a lot of places, a lot of times, just get a better price. We're getting into the fall. If people really want to sell, they'll end up taking less money for their home when they're in so much competition. So for the most part, 1 to 2.5% drop in average sale price. The semi-detached does look alarming at 7.2, but if you look back at last month, it was up by over 15% because there was a large number of luxury homes that had sold. This graph shows you the detached sale prices. You can look year to year, or you can look month to month, and you can see that, typically the prices do drop slowly throughout the latter part of the year. So it's very typical to have average sale prices in October being slightly below September. This is the same thing for the semi-detached, and you can see that spike from the September data from last month. You can see that, yes, we're below that, but we are higher than even the last 3 years. Well, the highest October sale prices on record there, and it's higher than what it was all the way back through May. So this is for the townhomes, and you can see that although we are slightly below where the townhome prices were last month, they are higher than what they were in October for both 2022 and 2023. So again, there typically is a little bit of a decrease in sale prices over the latter part of the year, just slightly. And this final chart is for condominiums, but it is all condominiums, not broken out into row or apartment style. You can see that the last 3 months have been lower than than those same August, September, October for the last few years. And I would say that it really does come down to inventory for the condos. There's just a really higher level of inventory than we had the last couple of years and for the last 5 years plus. These charts show you the close price to the original list price ratio. So basically how far below the original listing price sales are happening. So it's averaging between 97.4 to 98.3. Townhomes are a little closer to the asking price just because there's a little more competition for those. With the high levels of inventory that we've had throughout the last 6 months, this is bringing that ratio down. So places are selling on average for a little less than they would have been in the faster paced spring market when there was lower inventory. These charts are the average days to sell. So they're showing you that even across property types, it's in the 30-day range, 30 to 38, 31 to 38 days for the average property that is selling to sell. We can see that it's starting to climb. It's generally elevates throughout the winter months just because the market is slower. And here we have the monthly sales. So I find this chart quite interesting. So you see that this October, we had 1,018 sales. You can't see the number, but I know it. And that is significantly higher than sort of our curve that has been happening all throughout the year. Generally this year, we've been slightly above what the 2023 sales were for every month other than May and June. A bit of a slowdown there, but this October is abnormally high number of sales. You can see that it actually is all the way up to about 2017, 2018 levels of sales volume, which is great to see. It is still going to be well below the average 5-year or 10-year just because of those 2019, 2020, and 21 numbers that are just crazy high off the chart there. But it shows that we were much, much closer to, I'm going to call it average number of sales in the month of October. And then I'm normally, like the curve is just taking a different shape. Like it was a strong October for the number of sales. These 3 charts are the months of inventory, and you can see that all 3 for detached towns and condos dropped this month, and that's because it's a ratio of inventory to sales volume. And with the inventory levels are still very high, very much similar to what we had in September, but the sales volume was so much higher this month, so that brought those ratios down. It's expected to probably go up again after this month as the sales do drop off, but that'll depend on how much the inventory drops off as well. And finally, we have the graph for all property types across the city for months of inventory, and you can see that drop off of the months of inventory over this last month. It looks like we're still in the seller's market if you go by definitions. We know that there are differences depending on what type of house and in specific neighborhoods, whether or not it's, sellers balanced. And in some cases, it could be even a bit of a buyer's market. But on whole, still looking like it is in the seller's market. Okay, that's it for this week. I will have the Ottawa Real Estate Board data for next week and possibly the overall ones for my brokerage, and I'll include those and update anything else that we have for these charts. But I hope you have a fantastic week, and if you ever have any questions or comments, please get in touch.